cross-border war between Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza escalated dramatically today, prompting President Obama to call Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to offer U.S. help to arrange a ceasefire. Israel's military says the Palestinians fired well over 100 rockets into residential areas of Israel today. The Israelis say that their aerial assault on Gaza hit about 500 targets. So far this week, at least 80 Palestinians, most of them civilians, have been killed. Violence between Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza has been going on for decades, of course. This latest battle was sparked by the kidnapping and murder of 3 Jewish students in the West Bank last month and the revenge killing of a Palestinian teenager. Holly Williams is in Gaza City.
In broad daylight on a busy street in Gaza today, this car was incinerated by an airstrike. Islamic Jihad, a Palestinian militant group, told us 2 of the 3 men who were killed were its members. Israel also targets what it calls command centres, though in reality they're often the homes of militants. To give their families a chance to evacuate, the Israeli army sometimes telephones in advance or fires a small missile without an explosive as a warning. And the strikes are pinpoint accurate. This front gate is all that's left of a house barely 10 feet wide. The rest of the street was left unscathed. The residents were warned via telephone and all of them survived. But the system doesn't always work, and a rising civilian death toll is stoking Palestinian anger. Today they buried more of their dead in Gaza, some of them children. A family of 8 was killed in this home on Tuesday. The Israeli military said they were given a warning and made it out in time, but then returned too soon, just as the strike hit. The family's neighbour, Rida Karaway, gave us a different version of events.
The family cannot able to leave at this moment because it is not given a lot of time to leave at home.
They weren't given enough time to get out.
2 or 3 minutes.
And Holly Williams is in Gaza City tonight. Holly, what is Israel saying about these civilian casualties?
Well, Scott, Israel claims that the militants are using civilians as human shields, for instance, by launching rockets from residential areas. The Israeli military said today that nearly 150 missiles were fired at Israel. They did some damage to buildings, but so far no Israelis have been killed. And that's thanks in part to Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system, which shoots down many of those rockets.
Iron Dome paid for mostly by the United States. Holly Williams reporting from Gaza tonight. Thank you, Holly. There was a terrible fire in Lowell, Massachusetts today. 7 people were killed before dawn when flames swept through an apartment building just 100 yards from a fire station. Jonathan Elias is following this.
Cell phone video shows the fire ripping through the upper floors of the 3-story apartment building.
Bungalows, people hanging out the windows.
Witnesses said tenants jumped from windows, some tossing babies to rescuers below. 4 adults and 3 children died. 5 of the victims were in one family. Fire Marshal Stephen Cohn.
Obviously a horrible day in the city of Lowell. I cannot recall in recent times responding to a fire with this many fatalities.
The cause of the fire is under investigation.
I think there's ammunition going off. Either that or fireworks.
A stash of fireworks in one of the upstairs apartments may have been a factor. The building had a fire alarm, but survivors say they heard nothing.
Now, 10 people were hurt in this fire, including a fire captain. All are expected to survive. As for that building having fire sprinklers inside, it didn't. That building went up in 1890, long before state law required it.
This problem stems from the fact that there are tens of thousands of illegal immigrant children waiting for their day in court. Under a 2008 law, most children who enter the United States illegally without their parents are automatically entitled to a hearing. In 26 courtrooms all across America, they make their case. Michelle Miller met 2 of them in New York.
14-year-old Josue Amaya left a New York City courtroom today with his older sister and his attorney, hopeful that he will soon gain legal status in the United States. The Honduran native says after his father abandoned the family, he fled gang violence. It's very complicated, he says, because if you don't do what they say, they can kill you. Amaya was one of 100 children telling their stories to a federal immigration judge who will eventually decide their fate. Amaya's sister paid for his lawyer, Raj Jadeja.
The gangs run Honduras and El Salvador and Guatemala right now. It's a terrible situation. I don't blame him for coming. I would do the same thing.
Many other children could not afford attorneys. 16-year-old Elisa Osorio from El Salvador showed up with a family friend, wishing she had a lawyer. It would help me with the process, she told us. Nationwide, there are more than 40,000 other cases waiting to be heard in a backlog system. Jadeja took on 12 other children's cases today, 2 free of charge.
Generally, a case takes about 2 years to complete, or longer.
Today, the Republican leadership in Washington took a very dim view of President Obama's nearly $4 billion request to cope with a surge of illegal immigrants. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell complained the president was asking for a blank check. Mr. Obama says he needs the money to care for more than 50,000 immigrant children who've come here since October and to expand facilities so that illegal immigrants can be sent home more quickly. The governor of Texas says he has a solution to this crisis. Republican Rick Perry shared his idea with President Obama in a meeting yesterday, and later he shared it with our Major Garrett.
I told the president, I said, you can address this, and you can address it very quickly by picking up the phone, directing the Department of Defense to put 1,000 National Guard troops on that border, move them to the border, along with the Texas law enforcement surge that we have going on, along with the local law enforcement.
What you're saying is Central American countries and the parents who might be considering putting their children on this dangerous journey need to see a militarized presence on the U.S.-Mexico border.
What they need to see is boots on the ground.
The mere pictures will speak louder than anything you or the president might say.
I will suggest to you it's not just pictures. I mean, it's communications. It's talking back to the people back home. And they're going to hear very quickly that this has changed. This border is secure.
Early last year, we began this broadcast with very hopeful news in the battle against AIDS. Doctors in Mississippi had said that they had rid a baby girl of HIV, the virus that causes the disease. Well, tonight, Dr. John LaPook tells us there's been a major development in her case.
Physicians at the University of Mississippi Medical Center had been monitoring the 4-year-old girl since her unusually aggressive treatment during infancy. There had been no trace of active virus for more than 2 years, but a routine checkup this month showed the virus had returned. Dr. Anthony Fauci oversees AIDS research at the National Institutes of Health.
It was obviously very disappointing because they were hoping that this would be the first example of a real cure of a baby related to the fact that the baby was treated aggressively very, very early, essentially from the time of birth.
The case was especially promising because doctors thought the early regimen might have stopped the virus from finding hiding places in the body. At birth, the girl tested positive for HIV and was immediately treated with a 3-drug cocktail. At 29 days, she was HIV negative. But after 18 months, the mother stopped treatment and disappeared for 5 months. When the child returned to the hospital, doctors were surprised to find no sign of the virus. Normally, it must be suppressed by the indefinite use of medication.
The girl is now back on antiviral treatment and is responding well.
Racist comments got Donald Sterling banned by the NBA. Well, his latest rant came in a courtroom, and the target was his wife. Ben Tracy has the play-by-play in a case that seems to get stranger by the minute.
In court today, Shelley Sterling testified that her husband Donald originally agreed with her plans to sell the Los Angeles Clippers. She is trying to convince the judge that she alone has the right to sell the team because she claims her 80-year-old husband has Alzheimer's. Bert Fields is Shelley Sterling's attorney.
I don't think he's answered one question in all the times he's been on the stand.
In court Wednesday, Donald Sterling testified saying, "I will never, ever, ever sell this team. And until the day I die, I will be suing the NBA to make them pay." When his wife approached him in court, he told her, "Get away from me, you pig." Shelley, how could you lie? Bobby Samini is his attorney.
Having to sit there and watch your wife of 60 years give testimony, I think, it was too much.
Former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer wants to buy the Clippers for $2 billion. His attorney, Adam Streisand, says Donald Sterling's outburst proves he is unstable.
It was a shameful display by a seriously demented tyrant.
In April, the NBA banned Donald Sterling for life after he told his then-girlfriend that she could not bring black people to Clippers games, including NBA legend Magic Johnson.
Tonight, Indianapolis is preparing to bury one of its finest, a police officer who was among the latest to fall in gun violence that is growing so rapidly there that one city official said the city is under attack. What's causing this? We asked Dean Reynolds to find out.
There have been 75 murders so far this year in Indianapolis. At this pace, a higher per capita rate than New York City. The violent crime here has accompanied a sudden rise in illegal weapons and heroin. Troy Riggs is the director of public safety.
Anytime you have a type of drug that's being sold and widespread, money becomes an issue. And people will try to sell that drug to make money, and then people will start committing robberies and doing things they otherwise wouldn't do in search for that drug and in search for money to pay for that.
I don't think there's one investigation where we arrest traffickers that we don't recover firearms. You didn't see that 5 years ago. You see it now.
We toured the troubled east side of Indianapolis with Jack Riley of the Drug Enforcement Administration.
So you've got a ready supply of drugs and a ready supply of weapons. Sounds like a very combustible combination.
It really is, and to be honest with you, that's why I don't sleep at night.
In Indianapolis, 31 police officers have been shot at over the past 18 months. 9 of them were hit. But resistance to tax increases makes it harder to hire more. Over the 4th of July holiday, police officer Perry Wren, a 22-year veteran, was killed in a gunfight with a suspect who police say fired an assault weapon at him.
You said of what happened on Saturday that the city was attacked.
I did say that because I believe anytime a police officer is attacked, the city's attacked.
Today in Indianapolis, the flags are flying at half-staff. Tomorrow, Officer Wren will be laid to rest.
That deadly shooting, 6 people killed. The suspect in custody after that long standoff. Ryan Owens is in the Houston suburb of Spring, Texas, with the very latest. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning to you, Robin. Behind me is the home where this happened. 7 people here shot, 5 of them children, 1 just a 4-year-old boy. And what happened after the gunman left this house? Well, things got even more dramatic. A dinner-time car chase through the crowded streets of suburban Houston that ends in a standoff with a gunman in a cul-de-sac dotted with huge houses. Frightened families forced out of their homes for nearly 4 hours. The mayhem started at 6 p.m. Detectives say 34-year-old Ron Lee Haskell opened fire in the town of Spring, north of Houston. Authorities say he shot 5 children plus 2 adult family members who were looking after them. A violent end to a domestic dispute he was allegedly having with his estranged wife who lives out of state. Only 1 victim would survive, a 15-year-old girl. Police say she called 911 despite being shot in the head and told them the gunman was on the move.
The car has yet to be stopped.
She probably prevented more bloodshed. At 6:17, police catch up with Haskell in this silver car after chasing him for 4 miles before throwing down a spike strip.
The left rear tire is flat on the car.
His tires blown, snipers corner him in that cul-de-sac.
It's just a terrible thing. I don't know what could have happened.
At 8 p.m., police bring in 1 armored vehicle and then another, sandwiching Haskell's car for nearly 2 hours.
He held a gun to his head, so he does have an active dialogue that we now have turned over to the hostage negotiation team.
Then the dramatic conclusion, just before 10. Haskell gets out of his car, hands over his head, and police swoop in to finally end it. This morning, the gunman is in jail. The charges against him will be read in court. He will face charges of capital murder.
sixth round of China and U.S. strategic and economic dialogue has opened here in Beijing. The two-day event brings together senior diplomats and officials from both sides. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a speech at the opening ceremony in which he stressed the need to strengthen cooperation despite the ups and downs in the development of China and U.S. relations. He also said both sides should avoid conflicts and confrontations and expressed his wish for better relations. Now, this year's strategic dialogue covers a wide range of domestic and foreign policy matters, including some of the most sensitive, such as cybersecurity and maritime issues. It is co-chaired by Chinese Vice Premier Wang Yang and State Councilor Yang Jiechi, as well as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew. A number of cultural events are also on the schedule.
Communication and cooperation wouldn't be necessary if there were no differences. Both sides should look at the big picture and bear in mind that we need a new type of major power relations. We should recognize that the common interests of both sides are far bigger than our differences. We should respect each other and treat each other as equals, respect each other's sovereignty, integrity, and rights, respect the choice of development path, and not impose our own will and way of dealing with things on others. We should keep conflicts and frictions under control and improve mutual understanding in a constructive manner through dialogue and negotiation.
We saw them all turn around, and then they've turned into the neighborhood as we were turning in, and we just parked, and all these cops came, and we just called my mom first, and just, hey, because we live down the street, so we were like, Mom, locked all the doors, we don't know what's going on.
They were on a tail for a second, we didn't even realize. We just thought they were another people part of the neighborhood.
Yeah, we moved from a different neighborhood here, so that nothing like this would happen. It's kind of crazy.
And we're now queued up in the beginning of next year.
It's our hope very much that over the course of these next days, very soon, a way forward can be found that will provide the foundation for Afghanistan to grab a hold of the future. I've been in touch several times with both candidates as well as with President Karzai. We would encourage both of them to not raise expectations with their supporters, to publicly demonstrate respect for the audit process and the accountability process, and also to show critical statesmanship and leadership at a time when Afghanistan obviously needs it.
For the post-election.
凍土壁は The ice wall is an efficient way to reduce the overall quantity of contaminated water by avoiding groundwater to enter the area. We will be able to freeze the contaminated water as planned by March next year. That is the end of the current fiscal year.
The ties between Erbil and Baghdad have deteriorated, with both sides exchanging accusations. Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki has accused the semi-autonomous Kurdistan region of becoming a safe haven for what he described as terrorist groups fighting the central government in Baghdad. In his weekly televised speech, Maliki said that his government cannot stand idle, watching Erbil turn into an operations center for Takfiri militants and Ba'athist terrorists. In a phone interview with Press TV, Dr. Adnan Al-Siraj, a leading member of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's State of Law coalition, accused Iraqi Kurdish President Masoud Barzani of involvement in a plot to fragment Iraq and of willingness to cooperate with the devil to implement his project.
Maliki's statements come as Barzani is planning a referendum on independence. Such statements were meant to shed light on plots in the making against Baghdad.
In what they described as the first response to Maliki's accusations, Kurdish ministers voiced their boycott of Baghdad. A spokesman for Barzani said that Maliki had become hysterical and urged him to step down. An official from the dominant Kurdistan Democratic Party, KDP, declared that Kurdish ministers appointed to the Iraqi cabinet will not be going to Baghdad, nor will they be attending cabinet meetings.
The decision by Kurdish ministers to boycott the Iraqi government in Baghdad is a wise decision. It's been made to send a clear message to Maliki that he is not in a position to threaten the Iraqi Kurdistan.
Barzani accused Baghdad of inciting anti-Kurdish voices, adding that Kurds maintain what he described as the right to hold a referendum on self-determination. As Iraq slips into deeper havoc, the Kurds have moved their forces into Kurdish-populated areas outside their formal borders, including Kirkuk, a region which experts estimate holds 25% of Iraq's entire oil reserves. Barzani's calls for a referendum on the independence of Iraqi Kurdistan and talks of another referendum on adding oil-rich Kirkuk to the Kurdish province have put Barzani in a very tight spot, with Baghdad accusing him of burning bridges on one hand and of being a part of a conspiracy aimed at federalizing Iraq on another.
With little more than a Swedish diplomatic passport, American support, an unswerving belief in his mission, and immense personal courage. This remarkable man would go on to save 100,000 men, women, and children.
We honor him for what he did, but we must honor him for what we can do for him after all these years of detention and imprisonment in Soviet Union. There must be a way for all of us to come together and get the truth. That's what we want.
I talked about it with the American ambassador in Sweden, who told me he brought it up with President Putin, and I was very pleased to hear that step had been taken. But he told me the Russians have not replied yet.
Years ago tomorrow in Boston, 19-year-old George Herman Ruth made his major league debut pitching for the Red Sox. Generations of kids would come to idolize the Babe, but none more than a girl named Julia. Jim Axelrod has her story.
100 years later, he is still the answer when a 10-year-old at the Baseball Hall of Fame
That's pretty cool.
is asked to name his idol.
Babe Ruth.
You've not seen this before?
No, I haven't.
But it's a 97-year-old who feels his presence more than anyone alive.
That's Daddy and me.
Julia Ruth Stevens, the babe's adopted daughter.
It's wonderful. You still call him Daddy.
Oh, yes, I always did. When I think about Daddy, I think about him as just being my father, but he really belonged to the world.
She still loves talking baseball, and though she might have lost a little something off her fastball,
I don't get it very far anymore.
in the ways that really count, she's as sharp as ever.
What was it like going to the ballpark with your dad?
I loved going to the ballpark and watching Daddy play. Everybody almost held their breath when he came up to bat.
To the rest of the world, Babe Ruth was a Hall of Fame carouser who would down 3 hot dogs and 2 beers before a game. But Stevens says all that stopped once he married her mother.
I went off to camp and he made me a bedspread.
Your father,
Yes.
Babe Ruth,
Yes.
sewed you a bedspread.
To go on my bed at the camp.
I think it would have undercut his image a little bit if people knew that your father sewed you a bedspread to go off to camp with.
I don't.
A century after his professional debut and 66 years after his death, we still devour the details.
Did Mother call him George around the house?
She called him Babe. Everybody did.
In the late innings of her life, Julia Ruth Stevens has a single wish when it comes to her father.
I hope that his fame lives as long as baseball is played.
I don't think there's too much to worry about there.
Because, as a fan once said of her daddy,
It's gone.
heroes get remembered.
The greatest home run hitter of all time.
Legends never die. Jim Axelrod.